The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So a second woman has now come forward in an interview with a Connecticut newspaper saying that former Vice President Joe Biden touched her inappropriately. Amy Lapos told the Hartford Courant yesterday that Joe Biden pulled her in to rub noses with her at a 2009 fundraiser in Greenwich, Connecticut. Biden was vice president at the time. Lapos says, quote, "It wasn't sexual, but he did grab me by the head. He put his hand around my neck, pulled me in to rub noses with me. When he was pulling me in, I thought he was going to kiss me on the mouth." Not actually what Joe Biden did. So this is starting to become a thing, Pat. And I think it's really important to sort of stake out some pillars for our interpretation of what's going on. Number one, should we believe accusers in the absence of exculpatory evidence? I've always said that, my instinct when someone is willing to come out and say something happened to me is to say, wow, that's horrible. I believe you. Let's now get more information about it. And on that basis, I have no reason to disbelieve any of the women that have come forward and said this stuff about Joe Biden. The thing that is making me distinguish it from so much else, including the stuff that our current president is accused of doing more than a dozen times, is that Biden is being accused of doing stuff that he's done in plain view of cameras, which is not the same as any kind of sexual assault, right? I mean, let's believe exactly what this woman said. Joe Biden pulled her in and rubbed noses with her, which some might say is sort of equivalent to a kiss on the cheek. The woman thought Joe Biden was going to kiss her on the mouth, but he didn't. Am I saying that Joe Biden behaved appropriately? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that there's a pretty consistent track record of he does the sort of exact same weird Uncle Joe stuff. We have no evidence to date that it has ever gone before that. So this is one of those cases where even if we believe the women that this is what happened and they have every right to be uncomfortable, this falls very short in terms of accusing Joe Biden of anything approaching a sexual assault. It seems more like a faux pas that he seems to have ingrained into his personality.
Yeah, it's weird and it's creepy. And I think, it's the last vestige of that old workplace culture where it was acceptable for men to put their hands on women, not necessarily in a sexual way, but certainly in a way that's creepy, that's inappropriate. And largely as a society, we've moved on from that. I think Joe Biden, I don't know if he still does it or not. I mean, there's plenty of video clips and pictures from when he was vice president, certainly of him putting his hands on women and behaving inappropriately. The question really is, does this discount him from becoming a presidential candidate? Like, I would have to imagine he's going to announce soon if he's going to indeed announce, because it's getting kind of late now. Would this stop him from announcing a presidential run? Because, the Me Too movement, it's gained a lot of traction. I think this could be something that is waged against him by other Democratic presidential candidates. Maybe we shouldn't have someone like this in the field.
Well, there are accusations that the timing of this is a coordinated effort to smear him. And, I think it's very dicey because you don't have to defend his particular actions to be able to say that they are not something that I believe would disqualify someone from being president, as evidenced by the fact that Donald Trump is in the White House today. And I want to be really clear. I'm not defending any of these actions. I know people, I've been around people who do this type of stuff and they don't go further. They would never dream of going further. But, it's like I have friends who would do an uncomfortable thing where when they would hug women that they are friends with, they would sort of hold the hug a little too long and the hand would go a little low. It's not on the buttocks, but it's a little low on the back. And women have said to me, I don't feel comfortable when that happens, but it's like, that's all it is, and I don't really know exactly how to handle it. And these are problems in society. The fact that women aren't sure how to handle it, it's a problem. The fact that Joe Biden has done this a bunch of times, it's a problem. But the idea at this point that this disqualifies him as a presidential candidate because he's done 2 more times than we knew about, because it was on camera a whole bunch of times, something he's been doing for decades and decades in public eye, I don't know that I'm comfortable saying this guy can't be president. I just don't, I don't feel that that is what I should be saying. Maybe my view is privileged by being a man. I mean, I'm totally open to that. Maybe I'm wrong here. And there will be women in the audience who say, no, David, this should preclude him from being president of the United States. And if that's the case, I want to hear from you.
I totally agree. I don't think it disqualifies him from being president, but I think he should be more upfront about it. He should have like this big mea culpa where he says that he did place his hands on women and perhaps that was inappropriately, and he had done so many, many times over the years. And you know, just the excuse that he was doing it in a grandfatherly way or just being Uncle Joe, I don't think that stands up. It certainly doesn't anymore.
Yeah, and he sort of has put out a statement saying, listen, I don't believe, at the time I didn't believe I was doing anything appropriate, nor were my intentions predatory, but if someone was made uncomfortable, then I apologize. He has sort of done it. I don't know how far this is going to go. I think the second that there's an allegation of something more serious, the perspective on this changes drastically. And we'll see if ultimately that happens before or after he potentially announces a run for president. And by all means, if my male privilege is showing here, I'm open to that. I recognize that. Get in touch with me. I want to hear from you. And my perspective is certainly changeable on this particular issue. Okay, the New York state budget is doing a few very interesting things that some of which are more innovative, some of which are sort of behind the times in a sense. There is a new plastic bag ban that is part of the New York state budget deal. Some places banned plastic bags a long time ago. So that is one area where New York is arguably behind. The concern in New York is that because of the number of these sort of individual mom and pop bodega, food carts, etc., that depend on profit margins that are very, very thin and will be thinner if the cheapest plastic bags are no longer allowed. There's sort of a unique situation in New York where a lot of family-run and individual-run small businesses could potentially be impacted by the plastic bag ban. But big picture, more and more places are putting in place these plastic bag bans. Then there is what is called congestion pricing. The way that congestion pricing is going to work is that with the goal of reducing congestion at peak times, there are going to be additional tolls put in place on certain bridges and tunnels. I don't know for sure whether the full specific list has been released. I know that there's going to be an 1150 toll on one particular tunnel going into the city. It might be the Queens Midtown. I don't exactly remember offhand. This is something that's been done in Europe for a very, very long time. It is expected to both raise revenue for New York State, and also reduce traffic congestion, which has a positive pollution and climate change effect, et cetera, et cetera. And then a mansion tax. There are going to be particular what are designated as mansions that are going to be taxed at a higher rate. And there are going to be one-time levies. So these are going to be at the point of sale on multi-million-dollar homes. The rate would top out at 4.15% on properties that are valued above $25 million, which is expected to raise quite a bit of revenue. Here in Boston, there's something that some places have called a transfer tax. When you sell a property in Boston, you pay, I believe it's $4.56 per $1,000 of value. So if you sell a place that's $100,000, you are paying, is that $4,500, $450? Now, all of a sudden, my math is blanking. In any case, it's 0.456% of the total value to make it percentage terms. And New York is taking that a step further, and they are going to now designate mansions as above $25 million and take 4.15%, which is a significant amount of money that they're going to raise. So for the most part, these are progressive decisions, Pat, and New York State is a relatively progressive place in total, although there are some more conservative upstate and rural areas. Very interesting that this is moving forward and some pretty significant reforms here.
Yeah, and another thing that this budget does, and I think this is key, it eliminates cash bail for most crimes, most misdemeanors, non-violent crimes. That's very good because when we talk about the two-tiered justice system, one of the biggest problems facing it is the fact that if you say commit a misdemeanor or some sort of crime and you have to pay $3,000 to get out of jail that day, for some people who are poor, that's going to be their life savings. Maybe they don't even have that much money. Versus if you're rich, that's just, nothing. It's just a little bit off the top. And that worsens, our income inequality situation here in the country. And I think the budget addresses income inequality, environmental issues really well. It kind of reminds me of what's going on at the federal level with the Green New Deal. Of course, this is a budget, not any sort of sweeping legislation like a Green New Deal would be, but I'd have to imagine it's somewhat influenced by that.
There's also the kind of interesting reality of New York City as extremely progressive, and by geography, a lot of New York being relatively red. And it's sort of undeniable that a lot of these reforms really are tailored not only to address issues in and around New York City, but also are tailored to the sort of political palettes of the New York City more progressive crowd. But this is a state budget, so we'll see how it continues. It'll be interesting to see the implementation, and we'll certainly be following it further. We have a new report about Arkansas Medicaid beneficiaries who lost Medicaid coverage since the state started implementing a Medicaid work requirement in June. The right has by and large claimed that if you put a work requirement on Medicaid, two good things will happen. Number one, people who are able to work and are able to find jobs are going to do it. And that way you are going to reduce the cost of the Medicaid program to the state. They also say that it will incentivize people to remain employed. And they claim that people who fall through the sort of safety net are going to be caught, that there will be, I guess, this isn't going to create a hole in the safety net for people who truly are unable to work. We now have a report, and it turns out that a large majority of the 18,000 Arkansas Medicaid beneficiaries who lost coverage because of the work requirement have not found jobs, and they also don't have other health insurance, according to new data. So it's completely backfired, and it is completely backfired in a way that any sensible person would have predicted. You are ending up with people who don't have jobs and also don't have health insurance. As a result, they are now in a situation where they will have to use the emergency room as their primary care. This costs everybody money. This costs people money through health insurance premiums. This costs people money by hospitals having to raise rates to account for a percentage of people who are simply never going to pay. So, I find myself struggling, Pat, to even have too much to say about it, because it was obviously predictable that this was going to happen.
Yeah, so they're saying that 2,000 people have been able to find work out of the 18,000 Medicaid beneficiaries. That leaves 16,000 who haven't found work. But even of that 2,000, the database doesn't include those who are only working part-time, seasonal work. Maybe they were employed for only a few hours or a few days, and now they don't have a job. So yeah, it doesn't accomplish what it set out to accomplish, that's for sure. The real question, I think, is will the 18,000 people who have lost coverage vote Democrat in the next election cycle? I don't even know if they fully understand that Democrats are pushing for you to be able to have health care, whereas Republicans want to take it away from you. And in this case, they indeed have.
Yeah, and that may be true at the state level based on the Arkansas legislature, which I'm less familiar with, admittedly. But at the federal level, remember that Obamacare included something called a Medicaid expansion. So if Democrats, on the basis of the Obamacare infrastructure, got their way, states would actually increase access to and expand Medicaid, whereas what actually is being done with this work requirement is reducing access. It's making it so that healthcare and access to health services is even less accessible. And again, it's like, we know this stuff. Okay, we know that this is how it works. We know that the narrative about most people, or a significant portion of the people on welfare programs, are on them because they're lazy. They simply haven't decided yet to stop being poor or to stop being whatever it is that they're. We know that this stuff isn't true, okay? Any welfare system, if you study economics, if you study game theory specifically, there are free riders. There's something called the free rider program. This is an entire subspecialty of economics, free rider problems, in insurance, in welfare programs, whatever. You're never going to solve that, but the more important consideration, if you want to just be practical, is what is the cost of eliminating free ridership versus what is the cost of the free ridership itself. And very often when you actually make that consideration, you realize that it's okay that there is some level of free ridership. People who genuinely are lazy could work, could be totally off Medicaid because their job would pay so well that they wouldn't even qualify for Medicaid. Sure, these things exist in some small percentages with any kind of social insurance program. Every good study that we get shows us that going after it is in and of itself more expensive. There was the drug testing for welfare or food stamp recipients or whatever. The program to do the drug testing cost more than the savings obtained by kicking people using drugs off of the program. And then, of course, if you think about drugs as a public health issue, why would you even be trying to kick those people off to begin with? It doesn't make any sense. So age-old issue in economics, the results are completely unsurprising. What else can we say? That's it for today. New show, new bonus show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.